Hi, and welcome to Reed's Audio Reading. I'm Reed, and I hope you enjoy my channel. Today, I'll be reading the adventure The Standing Stone 3rd Edition, specifically scenes 7 to 9. This adventure was written by John D. Radcliffe. Scene 7, Dysons Tower. PCs might be directed to Dyson's Tower by Murdos, or arrive on their own through simple curiosity about who lives in the only tower in a one donkey town if the DM decides to defer the ambush in Scene 6 until later. Or they might arrive escorted by Tully or even carrying a wounded Dyson immediately after the ambush. See Scene 4 for a description of the tower. The outside door is usually kept closed and locked. Arcane locked at 10th level, Dyson and Tully can bypass the lock at will. Dyson, after gratefully accepting any healing the PC might offer, either for himself or more likely for Tully, thanks them for their willingness to help strangers. He offers them the benefit of his experience and local knowledge. If asked about himself and why a wizard would be living in such an out of the way place, Dyson spins a story about the tower having once belonged to his mentor, Olwen. When the old man died and Dyson inherited the place, he retired from adventuring and came here to live along with his fellow adventurers Tully, Henwin, and the Cuckoo. It's isolated, true, but until recently was a pleasant spot and well suited to spell research. His special interest, he says, is architectronics, particularly as it relates to transgenification. Most adventurers will ask nothing further, but anyone seeking more information may prompt Dyson to launch into a detailed discussion of arcane principles, which requires a knowledge arcane check, DC 20, to understand. The gist of it is this: Dyson is curious about structure, specifically the differences between different kinds of magic. He's exploring the barriers that separate arcane and divine magic, or differentiate approaches to the same category. Bard versus sorcery, for example. Or school specialization. Why should denying yourself access to one school of magic increase your power in another? He goes on about ramifications as long as the PCs let him, increasing the impression that he's a harmless duffer, a sage engrossed in his subjects while the villagers are being killed off around him. While Dyson talks arcana, Tully, who has heard all of this before repeatedly, talks shop with anyone who looks handy in a fight, wearing armor or carrying interesting weaponry. She asks to look at their swords and offers hers up for inspection as well. It's fine, heavy, but well balanced blade. Clearly dwarven work, bearing a mark that well informed may recognize as belonging to Drogeldin, a famed dwarven weaponsmith. Characters who adventured in the Forge of Fury may recognize the name. If asked, she says she won it by defeating the Dwarf Warden of the Great Barrow a few miles to the north. She can show them the place if they like. Dyson is well versed in the history of the area and can tell them its bits of lore regarding local landmarks as described in the megalithic monuments section earlier in the adventure. DM's note: if the party is a little light on combat specialists, Dyson suggests that they take Tully along for any expedition beyond the town. If they're light on spellcasters, he suggests the Cuckoo accompany them. He believes the strangers will be more willing to trust him if he provides a helper, particularly if the NPC pulls his or her own weight in a crisis. Henwin is busy with her endless prayers and he has research to do, so neither the druid nor the sorcerer joins the PCs even on a temporary basis. Scene 8: Into the Woods. At some point, the player characters are going to want to explore beyond the village, plunging into the empty woods in search of the answers to this mystery. What happens next depends on where the PCs go and what they do when they get there. If he can do so without attracting suspicion, Dyson has either the Cuckoo or Tully join the party to serve as extra muscle. Either can serve as a local guide, having visited all the interesting spots in the vicinity before the trouble began. If the PCs want to examine the standing circles around the town, Dyson accompanies them himself, the better to deflect them with long, involved theories. No wonder they call this the empty woods. There's no sound of birds, no buzz of insects, no rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth. Only the creaking of the trees in the wind, and the fluttering of the leaves, and the crackling of dried leaves and snapping twigs under your feet break the profound silence. The woods to the south, southeast, and southwest of the town are very dense, restricting movement to only one quarter normal, and even the requires constant hacking away at the underbrush. Creatures of tiny or smaller size can move normally. The PCs are also particularly vulnerable to Habay attacks while under the unending darkness of the trees here. See Scene 10. Characters flying over the trees will be tormented by pixie attacks, elven sniping from below, and the occasional grab by a Trent animated tree. However, the surrounding forest to the north, northeast, and northwest is much less dense, with plenty of room to walk between the trees. Enough sunlight gets through that the ground here is covered with grass, moss, as well as occasional brambles and ferns. This is clearly a tame forest, as opposed to wild woods. Each hour, the PCs travel through the forest, roll a D percentage die to determine what, if anything, they encounter. If the PCs are stationary, ignore any result other than none or face skirmish. Signs of trouble. Scattered throughout the empty woods are signs of discord between the wild elves and the fox human villagers of Ussington. If you roll a sign of trouble on the table below, a spot check DC 15 for large or larger objects, DC 20 for medium size or smaller objects, allow a character to notice it. If the characters are searching as they travel, they find it with a search check DC 10 for large or larger objects and DC 15 for medium size or smaller objects. Characters who come across the dead elves or fey creatures now have evidence that the villagers are not the only ones to suffer from whatever is going on here. Traps. In addition to the unpleasantness of stumbling across the signs of old atrocities, there's also real danger out here, both active from the Fae and the Horsemen, and passive. The Fae have rigged numerous traps to discourage Dyson's cohorts and the fox humans for venturing into the woods heedlessly. Their material resources are slim, but with a Trent as their ally, moving vast amounts of wood, dirt, or stone is not a limiting factor. Characters who run into a trap or two are likely to slow down and try checking everything. Let them. They may avoid a few traps, but this caution slows them so much that it should double their number of encounters with the horsemen, and ensure that they encounter the Habe under the worst possible conditions. See Scene 10. Unless noted, PCs can find these traps with a search check DC 20 and defeat them with a disable device check DC 20. Fey skirmishes. If the heroes haven't already fought the elves, these will be warnings. Arrows fired into the tree trunks only inches from a PC's face, pixie illusions warning the heroes to turn back, or trees moving to block characters' path. None of these creatures listen to any appeal to reason or call for a parley. The elves fell for that once, and the result was a massacre of their tribal leaders. However, if bad blood already exists between the PCs and the elves, or if one of Dyson's allies accompanies them, the attacks turn deadly. Capturing one of the Fae alive is difficult. The Fae retreat whenever possible, using arrow cover and traps to keep characters from closing with them. Should the PCs be very good or simply lucky, they may be able to wipe out the elves altogether, but this does not stop the horsemen, and in fact causes the PCs to become targets of his attacks. Note that any ally of Dyson does everything possible to make sure no elf gets taken alive. Scene 9. The Horseman returns. Once PCs leave the protective double circle of standing stones that surrounds Ossington, they'll be attacked at least once per day by the Horseman, who silently focuses his attacks on any villagers in their midst, only fighting PCs who get in his way. Remember that he can appear by day as well as by night, whenever he seems dramatically right, or within game whenever the PCs do something to trigger his involvement. Creatures. The Horseman does not attack player characters who have not yet attacked him or the Fae. However, Once they've attacked either him or the Fae, or if they've actively aided the villagers, they become legitimate targets of his vigilance. Conceivably, this attack could occur as soon as the night of their arrival in Ossington, where he could appear to cover the escape of Yellis in Scene 6. Tactics. Should the player characters earn his wrath, the Horseman unleashes the full array of his ghost abilities against them. This is most effective if he begins small and gradually builds, revealing additional powers with each subsequent encounter. In their first meeting, Scene 1, he uses only his manifestation ability. The next time they encounter him, his steed uses its frightful moan, actually a drumming of its hoofbeats. In later encounters, he also uses his telekinesis ability to hurl a single target up to 300 pounds, 120 feet in any direction, including straight up. Naturally, at all times, he uses his combat abilities to his best advantage. Though both he and his mount can fight separately if the other is banished or discorporeated, they prefer to fight together as a single unit. The habits of the living linger on in the dead. Remember that this vengeful spirit is deadly but not evil, despite appearances to the contrary. He avoids killing obviously good aligned characters if at all possible and may surprise them by the occasional chivalry gesture, not administering a coup de grace to a fallen opponent, for example. Courageous to a fault, faithful beyond death, he cannot communicate with the player characters to explain their mishaps. He can only protect the innocent, in this case the Fae, and punish the evildoers, Dyson, his cohorts, and the fox humans, to the full extent of his ghostly powers. Development. It may take some time for the PCs to develop a healthy respect for the Horseman as a foe, since in their first encounter he avoided combat and departed as soon as his goal, preventing the three fox humans from escaping his cordon, had been achieved. If the PCs perform exceptionally well in this first encounter on the road, they may even believe him destroyed. They are soon disabused of such optimism. The horseman cannot rest until his mission is achieved, or his remains have received appropriate burial rites according to his faith, the Church of Pelor. Scene 13. Therefore, even if slain in combat, his material form reforms within 2d4 days and rides forth again. The same applies to his ghostly steed, formerly his faithful warhorse. However, since he always takes form again at the place of his burial, the tarn below Red Horse Hill, this may win the PCs a little time. The horseman can travel at a tremendous pace, especially since he can ride right through trees or other obstacles. But still, it takes him some time to move from one spot to another. Thank you for listening to this audio reading of The Standing Stone 3rd Edition, Scenes 7 to 9. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day. Best regards, Reed.